Well, hello, listeners, and welcome back to the Purposeful Marketing Podcast. Aaron, Mary, James is here. We also have a special guest today, Leanne, and I'm going to kind of pass it over to her in just a little bit, but I wanted to kind of preface of what we're trying to do here. Is again, on the Purposeful Marketing Podcast, our original idea was we are having these conversations, and we wanted to share them with the rest of you. Again, if you're a listener, you're a marketing practitioner, you're doing the tactics that we're doing every day. We talk a lot about leveling up to that senior level, how Aaron, Mary, James, and myself got there. Well, we want to start to bring guests on to kind of talk about their experiences too. Sometimes we'll have a little more solidified topics, like bringing Kevin on to talk about performance marketing. Some topics today are going to be wide open because that's how we like it, right? Is we like to ask those questions, those lofty, big ideas, and kind of dialogue through them. So, Leanne, you're here today. You have a great podcast yourself. I feel like it's almost like a sister podcast to ours. I wanted you to just kind of give you space to talk about it. And then Mary, James, and myself, we'll just kind of ask you questions and kind of dialogue about how it started and where it's going now.
Thanks. I appreciate that. My name is Leanne Dow-Weimer, and the podcast in question is Markigy, the Science of Marketing Strategy. I started this for so many reasons, but the number one is that I want to have conversations with marketers about marketing, and I want us all to improve on that with the customers in mind, right? Because there's always different ways that you can go after business. And I think that long-term business and short-term wins need to be supported by long-term goals and long-term thinking, which is ultimately building relationships and coming back to being customer and human-centered. So that's kind of my spiel about it. But also, to level that in is the blend of creativity and science and all those things that are part of modern day marketing.
Love it, Leanne. I think, again, we've asked the question before on this show many times, like, is marketing science, art, math, whatever you want to call it? I want to bucket under philosophy myself. However, Mary, you're the strategist in the room. Now, how do you like the sound of that? The science of marketing. What does that make you think of?
Yeah, I love that. Love that you're bringing that conversation. I love that you're doing something that ties science. So we think of that as, I work in the industrial sphere. So I know Aaron is in a different sector of marketing. James and I are in industrial. So that resonates pretty hard with us because we talk to a lot of technical professionals. We talk to a lot of engineers. So they do like the hard numbers, the facts. So that makes a lot of sense to us. But then I love that you have that artistic side, the philosophical side, a very human side of bringing customer insights. And then how do you tie that back to the data, the science, the facts? So I think that's a lot of the exploration that I have to do on the strategy, is interpreting customer insights and the insights that we're getting in the real world, so that engineers and our technical professionals can make better business decisions.
Heck yeah. I think, again, science, as I see it, is like, you're almost like verifying the truth. And where like philosophy is like, we're deconstructing that truth. That's, again, we ask a lot of questions like, why do we do the things we do here? I think it's important. Also, kind of what you're saying, Mary, about like who we talk to as customers is just coincidentally, like a lot of times we're talking to engineers, we're talking to people who have a very scientific mind. But I think there's a lot we can learn from marketing that way. Now, James, you talk to a lot of engineers, you talk to a lot of quote unquote, to me, scientists. How do you feel about that? Give me a riff here.
Yeah, I mean, I know we've talked before about like, is marketing an art or a science? Or I don't remember exactly what I said, but I'm sure it was something like, who cares, or neither, or like, anything is an art if you treat it as such, anything is a science if you treat it as such. I guess like when I think of scientists, I think of like a very lifelong pursuit, or like an amount of like really hardcore dedication from within. To same with artists. I'm kind of curious, like Leanne, like how'd you get into marketing? Or the question I was going to ask is, do you like doing marketing? And maybe follow it up with like, why or why not? But if you could also, I'll let you kind of spiel about how you got here a little bit.
I appreciate it. I love talking about my journey to get here. There's always that saying, you want someone to feel happy to ask them about themselves. My undergrad started off as and finished as kinesiology. And instead of choosing like the easy path, I chose the exercise physiology path, which means that I spent time in chemistry labs. I spent time like looking at like molecular and cellular pathways and really doing a lot of that heavy science. And one of the things that has always been part of my life is the idea of proactive versus reactive. And a lot of my peers then went on to healthcare fields, which I didn't want to do because I felt that the way that in the United States our healthcare is set up is very reactive instead of proactive. Which led me further on my journey. And as I got into the world outside of my bubble where people didn't understand when I was saying things that were very technical, I learned that how you package what you're saying and how you deliver it and how you get people to adopt it is like 9/10 of the battle of getting it to actually happen. And so then I started to kind of figure out what I enjoyed about my work and what kinds of things I was just doing naturally. And then also in the interim, I went and my graduate degree, instead of going to like a nutrition master's or PT master's or OT master's, I decided to get an MBA because what stood out to me once again was that it doesn't matter what trade or what niche you're in. If you don't know how to make a business successful, you're not going to be able to pay your rent. You're just not going to be able to accomplish the goals that you're after accomplishing. And whether that's altruistic or it's selfish, if you have, personal training or fitness clients and you can't pay to have a space to train them in, how many people's lives are you actually going to impact? So that's part of how I ended up this way. And marketing just felt natural and fun to me, whereas I had been in like more heavier sales positions. And I was like, man, I just wish these people would call me instead of me having to cold call them. And so here we are. I'm trying to get people to find the information they want, be able to serve themselves and find, a relationship and a pathway to meet their goals with it feeling natural.
Thank you for that. That was I appreciate that color. None of us were marketing students. I don't think most people whose job title is like marketer or marketing specialist or marketing manager. I don't think most of those people studied marketing. I don't know really what that says about the industry, but yeah, I guess I'll just dish it to somewhere else to ask a question. I'm thinking of plenty of other. The wheels are spinning, but I'm not arriving anywhere at the moment.
Yeah, I have a good question for you, Leanne. Like, how did you arrive? Like, coming from that background, so coming from the sales background, I'm always really interested to hear how marketers come to the realization of customer insights being kind of the focal point of your marketing strategy, because I think that's such a huge gap in most of the companies we see. So I'd love to hear like how you got there.
So being kind of data driven, right? Or, quantification driven. So one of the things that I found fun was creating like a content calendar, but I hate doing things that just don't land. And, like any of us, we want to have the best outcomes. And so I use data to and insights to signal whether or not I'm chasing the right butterfly, because it sucks when you don't like, no one likes flopping. And so to me, early on, kind of using those kind of breadcrumbs to support my hypothesis or what I kind of just picked up from being in a, one community or another was, picking up the breadcrumbs of like, who's my audience, who's actually coming to my website, how long are they staying there, what age range are they in, and then kind of using that to extrapolate, okay, here's my next hypothesis. I had a client at one point that was a mix between heavy science and consumer experience. And so when I saw, who was coming to their website, I then had to make social media clips for it. And I was like, what kind of music do these people listen to? And, what music should I be putting on this content? And so then I would look at Billboard charts and what, Statista and different sources to support and experiment with. And so I don't see it as like an either or. It's all part of the puzzle. And you can't see my hands beneath me, but they're going like this. They're intermingling. Is that a good answer? You tell me.
Oh yeah.
No, that was great.
Something I'm thinking about, because again, I love that you shared your story too, and we love that because, again, all three of us, non-linear path to marketing. Actually, I believe all of us have an English degree, so maybe that says something about us. James and I have a philosophy double major there, so that's why we're into philosophy. But within that is something that we all, I think about, which is thinking about the world and like, how can it be different? And kind of what your story, Leanne, you were kind of saying is like, just observing these things and saying like, there's a better way. And then you can apply the scientific framework to it. Again, no one told me to do that when I started marketing. It just kind of made sense, right? It's like, I should have a hypothesis. I should go test it. And the reason being, because I really want us to all talk about this idea with marketing, is the idea of failure, and like what you can learn from that. And I think that's what marketers struggle with, especially as you're like starting your career, is like, I want to be right. I need this to be correct. Again, we're all three of us are in an agency. It's like, we're working with clients. Like they need to understand this, but like failure is such a big part of like scientific methodology, but also like learning to be a better marketer. Leanne, do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, failure is required to be a good marketer. And I'm not saying that you have to like totally crash and burn someone's entire company, because that's not cool. But failure in a sandbox, and this is what I picked up from growing up in the San Francisco Bay Area, is the sandbox concept. You want to test things on a smaller scale, and then you can scale it up. And that's what a lot of companies that hire agencies are trying to do. Is they're trying to scale their business. And they come to you with the problems, they come to you with what they think. And when you can test that in a sandbox and be like, look, I agree with you, but let's prove it first. And then they feel more comfortable further investing into the strategies that you come up with because you've proven it on a smaller scale. Or they respect you because you're like, hey, we tested this with, 2% of your total budget instead of 20%. And we were able to prove that this wasn't quite it. This did not vibe match with your people. And you can take that information and then be like, so what we learned was that these 5 things are variables, and we can adjust for these variables and try X, Y, and Z now. And it gives you a path forward that's data informed and protects their long-term goals. And that's part of being, respectful of the relationship you have with them. Now, I'm discovering that not all agencies care about long-term. And so that's been kind of one of those things that you discover, is that what'll help you stand out and differentiate yourself as an agency is actions like that support your branding of being human-centric by doing it in your processes.
What's your favorite task that you do, as a marketer? Like, we all do so many different things.
Oh, man. That's so good. That's such a great question. It's so hard to answer. I don't know. I'll give you a top 5. How about?
Oh yeah.
There was a moment last week where I was on social media and I was, exchanging comments with someone else, and I could tell that we clicked. And my favorite task would be engagement in social media, because then you can follow the string of the conversation and you can expand on it and you can get it into different formats that grow. So if there was like a an Instagram stories or a LinkedIn, comment thread, then the task of engagement would be to reply back or to like take it to the DMs or book a call where you could have a more in-depth interview or, following that pathway. So I love the task of engagement. And then I also really enjoy all right, team, this is what we're doing this month. We are doing X, Y, and Z. We are putting it color coded. We all are on the same page. This is what we're tackling. And kind of that like football huddle, like, hoorah, like, let's go do it. I enjoy that a lot. Because chaos, while it's a part of and volatility is part of our everyday lives, when things are nicely buttoned up, it makes me happy.
Leanne, we have very different favorite tasks. It's wonderful.
I'm such a nerd. What's your favorite task, James? Help me out.
I mean, I like talking to customers, probably first and foremost, beyond anything, or sometimes talking to subject matter experts if they're interesting and wonderful enough, which a lot of times they are. Mostly just talking to people. But not on social media. And not in the football huddle.
Well,
that's wonderful. I love that. I'm glad that we don't just talk to a bunch of clones of me on this show. So I appreciate that.
Well, and I see the engagement aspect as two sides of the same coin for yours of talking to customers, right? Because that's who we're talking to. It's just in different formats. And, I think that starting there as the best part is pretty on point.
I think this is a perfect segue, and I love that we just got here organically, which is like this idea about talking to people and engagement. So again, with being scientific, there's some things that are just kind of hard to explain to our customers. Again, particularly us that work at an agency, is like building relationships matter, right? And there's sometimes a simple and straightforward way to do it that doesn't involve science. That doesn't involve critical thinking. What it involves is talking to people. And again, that's why I want to bring up, because you're going to have to bear with me for an anecdote here as we get to the next topic. So the reason that we're all here today is because we try to build a relationship. We just try to engage with someone. We just try to talk to them as a person. And again, why Leanne's here today is because she knows my colleague Joseph. She was on Joseph's podcast. I put on my LinkedIn, I need someone on a podcast. Leanne DM'd me, right? And we didn't even know each other. And we just started talking to each other, and now she's here today. Well, the reason why I know Joseph is because of Mary, because Mary was a colleague of mine, and Mary was on Joseph's podcast. And again, when I was looking for new jobs, she was like, Joseph's a great guy. And again, James doesn't even use social media, so I don't know how he fits in this picture. But this idea about building relationships, and specifically, we may want to use LinkedIn as an example, as Mary, I know you're a prolific poster. And Leanne, I know you're doing a lot of marketing activity there as well. Like, what is this? Like, building relationships on social media through engagement, like, why? Some people still don't get it today in 2022. I'll throw that to you, Leanne, first, and then Mary, if you want to follow up.
So why is such a big answer, but it's because you have to meet people where they're at. And if your people are using if your people have certain characteristics, then they're going to be drawn to certain types of formats. And that's not like, no one's a monolith, but the number one reason why is because your entire goal is, if it's to build a relationship, which I think it should be as business, then meeting people where they're at. And if they're on LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is a growing platform that is expanding its offerings, is known for being B2B, it's a little bit cleaner of topic matter. It's a little bit cleaner of response. It's a little bit safer to engage on. Then that makes a lot of sense to me. And I feel like I've almost lost the question here, but I have a point, I swear. That building a relationship, the reason why it matters is because if we want to put it into business speak and quantify people, which makes me feel yucky, but it reduces your churn rate. It creates a higher lifetime value of your customer. It makes them more likely to be an evangelist or refer other people or give you warmer leads. It makes the whole process smoother because you've already built an affinity. It reduces friction, and it just feels better for everybody involved.
Definitely. I'll take over for a little bit and then Mary can chime in because, I think, again, what's so important, and as I'm a performance marketer, so I should be very metric and data informed and insight leaning. But I learn the most when I talk to people. Like, again, there's a reason why we have this podcast right now. I'm talking to you because it's like I'm learning so much from you. There's a reason why James' favorite task is talking to customers because you learn so much from customers. I think the answer is partly, well, you got to be where your customers are. And some of them are on LinkedIn. We're all in marketing, all our peers. And again, us in agency world, our clients are on LinkedIn. So that's why we're there. But yeah, building relationships doesn't have to be scientific. It can just be the thing you do. And it makes so much easier. Mary's got a special guest, so I'll let you talk, Mary.
Yeah, for those of you listening, my son's in the background waving hi to everybody. So he's saying hi to you too. I love that you said that, Aaron, like the quantifying it, Leanne, all the points you made were great. And I do think that's so true about LinkedIn. It's a safer place. It's a more professional place. And the content there is more geared toward like education and examples, like specifically to business. So that's what attracted me to the platform initially. And the reason I liked it so much is I found a podcast I really liked. And on the podcast, they mentioned that they post a lot on LinkedIn. So I go to LinkedIn, I follow, it's MJ Peters for those of you who don't know her. And I was like, oh my gosh, she like posts really good content like all the time. And then because LinkedIn is kind of an echo chamber and you see the same people and you see the same people commenting and liking on certain posts, it really helped me grow my network in this unique B2B marketing space. And I got exposed to ideas I hadn't thought of before. So it really, LinkedIn as a platform and as a channel helped me evolve and grow as a marketer so much faster than if I had tried to use, just Google or some courses, because you get instant feedback. You really are building relationships. And the unique thing about LinkedIn is those relationships are almost like business mentorships in their intent, which I think is so cool.
Yeah, I think there's a special place for LinkedIn. I think, James, I'm always going to throw it to you because you may have the counterpoint, maybe you don't, but the idea about building relationships and talking to people, what do you think about that?
I think that that's great. And I think that, I guess the one way I would stand up for myself is I do have relationships, although I do not post on social media. But I do think that if you can do that for your customers, then that's wonderful. I do like it's probably the best thing that you can be doing. I do wonder, is that at what point is someone performing sales when they're doing that? That's kind of like a separate question we've never really talked about that should maybe that's a future topic. Curious, like Leanne, what your take on that is, because it seems to me like something that every salesperson should be doing. And that doesn't mean marketing people shouldn't be doing it by any means, but I'm kind of curious, like, if you're thinking about, your accountabilities or your accountability chart at your organization, like, if building relationships and maintaining them with customers on social media was an accountability, where really should it be in an organization?
I have lots of answers. So one, I love that you brought up doing this offline, and what that sparked was, obviously in the past 3 years, COVID has played a large part of accessibility of getting belly to belly and, meeting people. And so that definitely opens up a lot of popularity for LinkedIn. The second part about, is it selling, brings to mind, influencer marketing, and brings up social selling and who owns what. And, as marketers, we love or loathe both the conversation of what is a lead and what is an MQL. And so, there's really, it reminds me of something that Tamara Kidich-Jarvoy from Venice Solutions talks about, and that's the demand generation throughout the funnel and how you can build demand even all the way through the sale. And so I see social media and LinkedIn as creating demand and less of a, and sometimes it is a social selling, like there's plenty of people like, okay, buy my course. But for the most part, I think the intent of the poster is more that demand generation instead of the demand capture. Is that a good answer? How do you
No,
feel
yeah,
about?
that's great. I think that my general feeling is that it's something that, from the perspective of the business, you'd probably like to see everyone doing more of. And I think that there's an amount that when things are working for B2B companies, probably especially, it's the salespeople that have the ability to do this because they're responsible for maintaining a very particular client list, and they're responsible for nurturing something with just such a different amount of value than another company. Like a B2B industrial customer is worth, 100,000 times more dollars than a direct to consumer customer. And quite often a lot more worthwhile than even like a SaaS B2B customer. Some of our clients' deals range between like $2 and $5 million on a deal. And so I think there is an amount that like, there's a lot of gray area in terms of like, if you start trying to take social media relationships and making it a part of your business model, there's probably other questions that like the organization should be answering for their employees to clear some things up about what expectations are. And that's usually like where I start getting involved when we talk about LinkedIn, is like, I think that individual people should be really careful in how they use it for their work, and how they use it for their company. When we use it to build a personal brand, the risks I think are lower. Maybe a good follow-up question, if I'm just allowed to handle the floor here, is like, have you ever felt like in engaging with customers on social media that have you ever been in a position that you were uncomfortable, like with being yourself?
I pardon the laugh. The internet is a dangerous place for women. And so yes, I have been very uncomfortable in many, and this is part of why I prefer LinkedIn to then say like Reddit. It's generally less hostile. But one of the things that I learned very early on in my career was when I was actually in fitness, and I would have a manager and we would do TOs, takeovers, turnovers. And there's that fine art of nurturing something and then passing it off smoothly. And I think that should be in every marketer's toolkit for social media, because you want to make sure that you aren't overstepping your liabilities, your role, your capacities, your knowledge. And there's some things, especially in those bigger, more technical deals, the types of questions that start to get asked are indeed more of those sales questions where you really shouldn't be answering, because maybe legal needs to answer. Maybe it depends on scope and different things that aren't necessarily part of that top of funnel or even FAQ kind of space. But definitely, and to your point more, is that there's a difference between personal branding and awareness and that more deeper kind of sales approach, where there are liabilities, especially for many companies where maybe maybe that person is really good at sales. The salesperson is really good at sales on a phone call, in a Zoom call, but maybe they just stick their foot in their mouth in the comments section. And you want to not let them or not have them do that. But you can't just single people out and be like, nope, all of you sales guys, you aren't allowed to do comments, right? Because that's not cool. And so there's a lot of gray area and a lot of nuance there for sure.
Yeah, I love the thoughtful answer there, Leanne, because I think, this is the hardest thing for us is like trying to get our clients to do what we're doing here today. And like, there is a fine line. And again, if I could have my cake and eat it too, I'd just be like us, make friends on LinkedIn and like make a podcast and whatnot. But as you're rightfully pointing out, is like, it is a little more complicated than that. And I think, James, that's why I always appreciate your point of view too, is it's not as simple as I want it to be as a marketer. And I think that's why we have these conversations so we can get better. Again, Mary, I know this is a push at Gorilla Substance. I know it is. It's a push at Proof Point Marketing too. Getting clients to do organic LinkedIn posting. Now, with what Leanne just said, do you just have any kind of final thoughts on that?
No, nothing crazy pops out. I mean, I think the important thing that Leanne pointed out is like there is like a risk versus reward. And I think more often than not, the risk is worth the reward. So I think a lot of, especially executive team members who are skeptical about posting on LinkedIn are just worried about consistently engaging, doing the time, saying the wrong thing. What would I even talk about? Pretty common things that even, Aaron and I struggled with when we started posting on LinkedIn too. And I think just showing them that even just working in public, quote unquote, so just what are you doing day by day? How is it affecting you? How is it affecting your business? People will find those things helpful and your target audience will find those things helpful. So I love that you pointed out that there are some risks to posting on social media or doing any marketing strategy, but more often than not, if you are willing to do it the right way, the risk is worth the reward.
Definitely. So we'll wrap up there. Again, appreciate all of you for doing this. It's the birth of putting science and philosophy together. That's how we got this conversation. I'll give some quick words. I'm passing Leanne if you want to just say anything else to the listeners as a final note. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. I was like, oh no, I spoke too soon. I mean, I definitely agree with Mary, and I would just say, come in with a plan and be willing to evolve with it.
Awesome. So yeah, go listen to Markigy, the Science of Marketing Strategy. I'm looking at it on Spotify. I'm sure it's everywhere else as well. It's a great podcast. Again, my colleague Jobs is on there. So if you want to listen to that one, we're going to do more of these. So if you're listening and you like this and you're like, I'm a marketer, please come on. What we're just trying to do is just have the conversations that we have every day that you may not have yourself. That's that space we're creating, and we'd love to have you on. I'll put links to Markigy, and also, Leanne, everyone can find you on LinkedIn too if they have any questions.
Yeah, absolutely. I spend way too much time on LinkedIn.
Heck yeah. So that's where you find it. If you need Aaron, Mary, James, DM us, give us some feedback. We actually have some. James, I see you kind of laughing. It's happened.
Yeah.
So.
Oh yeah, I would love. I love getting messages on LinkedIn. That's all I use the tool for, and I'd rather do that than hate scroll it when I get online. So,
heck yeah, no more hate scrolling. So, be good to yourself. Ask us those questions. We're here for you, and have a good one, listeners.